All right, YouTube, it's now been announced that Ariel Sharon is dead, the warmongering butcher Sharon. And I took some flack when I said that, specifically from people who are either Israeli or people who support Israel, which would mean basically evangelical Christians. Like it or not, though, he was a butcherous warmonger. He oversaw allowing Lebanese militia raise refugee camps and kill women and children, didn't lift a hand to stop it. He was the mastermind of the settlement plans in the area in disputed land, essentially, when destabilization occurred and Israel reached out and then started going to war with its neighbors. And you can blame whoever you want for those wars. I know both sides are blamed, and no one's really blameless in that struggle, by the way. They essentially, Sharon said, well, start settling these hilltops because anything we don't grab is going to go to the Palestinians. Clearly a bigot. I know it's not politically correct to say that about someone who happens to be Jewish. I would say that there's nothing wrong with it any more than saying that someone like Arafat might be a bigot for, saying or rather the Iranian dude there, Ahmadinejad, saying, well, let's wipe Israel off the face of the earth. The Holocaust is a lie. Well, it's both bigotry. Doesn't matter whether a person's Jewish. I don't care if it's politically correct and never have cared. But Sharon was a warmonger. But oddly, towards the end of his reign as prime minister, when he started withdrawing troops from Gaza and talking about a two-state solution and started working with Arafat, working with the Palestinians on more amicable terms, just the moment that he does that, he suddenly falls ill. And nobody smells a rat with this at all. It's just completely coincidence that he happened to stroke out around that time. I do smell a rat. I think that it's quite likely that the same agents in Israel that support the hardliners and always have, groups like Mossad, poisoned him or something. It's perfectly legitimate claim to say that that's possible. Is it certain? No. It's possible, yes. There have been all sorts of hit jobs on people who haven't backed the Zionist regime over there. And you point this out online and you'll immediately be called a Nazi, you'll immediately be called an anti-Semite. It's not, it's criticism, it's valid criticism of the Israeli government. Has nothing to do with the Israeli people, 99% of whom just want to live and work the same as 99% of the Palestinians do. They'll say, well, if the Palestinians want peace, tell them to stop launching rockets at us. Well, again, that's not 99% of the Palestinian population. It's a complete misnomer to use that argument, just as it would be a misnomer to say, well, the Israeli people are terrible because of what their government and military does. But Sharon is dead. He finally succumbed to, he had all sorts of problems. I mean, beyond simply being in a vegetative state because he had a massive stroke, his kidneys failed, his liver failed, his lungs were failing, his heart was failing. He had blood poisoning. Some of those issues cleared themselves up, but his kidneys were completely shot and his liver too. So I mean, it was only a matter of days or weeks before he finally kicked the bucket and started pushing up daisies. So what you're probably going to see, as I predicted before, you're going to see the Palestinians and like the Iranians and groups like that celebrating. They're going to egg Israel on. Israel's probably going to egg people on too because they'll be putting on this huge state funeral. They'll be talking about now the Messiah. Believe it or not, here, a hell of a lot of Israelis, Yitzhak Kaduri, in his prophecy about Sharon dying and then the Jewish Messiah coming, a hell of a lot of Israelis believe that. A very large number, surprisingly, have been talking about this prophecy. When Kaduri died, there were 100,000 people parading through the streets. He was something like 110 years old or some inordinate, insane number like that. He was friggin' born at the turn of the century. What you have is a situation where the Jews now, at least certain groups, the Kabbalists certainly would respect this man. I don't know about the orthodoxy over there. Now believe that the Messiah is shortly coming to Israel. When large groups of religious people with nuclear warheads at their behest and things like this start to flip out because they think something cosmic is happening, they usually make very irrational decisions. And right now, Kerry is over in Israel trying to broker a two-state solution, trying to broker a peace deal. It's been done before. They never actually work because the second that some Palestinian kid gets a hold of a bottle rocket, sends it over the wall, or the moment that Israel gets word that there might be some sort of terrorist hiding out in a school, all hell breaks loose and they start firing rockets at each other. These people are pathologically unable to exist in peace because both sides they're posturing essentially. They want more land. And I've debated people numerous times, well, Palestine never existed. And then other people say, well, Israel never existed. And what I try to point out is it was a British chunk of land that was given to the Jews. Minus the land that is currently held and some on top of that, which was given to the Palestinian people. The chunk of land was called the British Mandate of Palestine. It was not called the British Mandate of Israel, the British Mandate of Judea, or anything like that. And then you can get into the Balfour Declaration and all that nonsense. But this is a chunk of British foreign colony that was deeded over to these individuals to give them a homeland because Britain no longer wanted to maintain the colony. That's where Israel came from. It's British land. And before that, it was owned by the Ottoman Turks for centuries. And before that, it was part of the Byzantine Empire. And before that, it was part of the Roman Empire. It hasn't been an independent state in thousands of years. People don't seem to want to understand this. There wasn't an independent Judean state since far into antiquity. And there's some confusion over whether there ever really was an independent state in this location that wasn't being co-opted by some other group. The Babylonians held these people. This is tribal settlements. That's all that was ever there. They never had a stable culture that wasn't either at war with somebody or enslaved and sort of semi-annexed by some other country. People don't seem to want to understand this. And the tribes in the region, by the way, were never always Jewish. The Canaanites lived there, the Hittites and all these other groups. These were not Jewish tribes. All these tribes essentially held little tribal pieces of land. That's the thing about the Middle East. And this is what people also don't realize about states like Iraq, states like Syria. These places were formed, by and large, as the Ottoman Empire dissolved, out of land that had been held under that empire and then the Byzantines before them for centuries, back into Roman antiquity, which have no identity. They have tribal identities, yes. They have no national identity. There's no national Iraqi identity. It doesn't exist. That's why you have these separatist groups and what we call terrorists, and why the Kurds want their own independent state, because these areas were carved out of what used to be the Byzantine Empire and later the Ottoman Empire. And they were carved out by colonialists from Europe. They were deeded to these groups. They were created as semi-autonomous regions and then given statehood. And then they gained independence over time. These are colonial eras. The map of the Middle East as it stands today is largely drawn by European colonialists who used to own that land, or drawn up by the receding Ottomans and was carved up by these different tribes. Israel is no exception to this fact. The state of Israel as it stands today doesn't even occupy the same historical borders that Judea occupied before it became, back when it was a Roman province, and then before that when it was, for a very short period of time, independent. It doesn't occupy the historical land area. If it did, it would be giving up part of its southern border and expanding east and north. But people don't want to understand this. They think that this is actually a historical border. No, it's a colony. It's a former British colony that was called the Mandate of Palestine. And now that Ariel Sharon's dead, you can look for all hell to break loose over there, because Netanyahu is even more of a hardliner than friggin' Ariel Sharon was. The Palestinians have gotten more hardline. There's Hezbollah in the region constantly provoking attacks. And typically they go into the Palestinian area, fire rockets and retreat, and then the Palestinians get shit for it. You have the Egyptians currently falling apart. Syria's being repulsed by civil war. Iran is still enriching uranium. Iraq is being taken over by Al-Qaeda. The whole area is destabilizing steadily, and people don't seem to understand that. They say, well, they've always fought over there. Yes, they have. There's never been quite a situation with this much violence, with this many revolutions and coups and all of this stuff. But it's good that Sharon's dead, because even though he did have a change of heart months before he died, went into a coma coincidentally, by the way. I'm sure that nobody could have possibly caused him to stroke out or known that he was going to. Uh, uh, it's Sharon being dead is essentially a good thing for the region. Um, if only for the fact that he was a warmonger, and really he should have been put on trial for war crimes. He was directly implicated in these massacres. People, the Zionists and the nationalists and the evangelicals don't want to admit it, but that's the way it is. It's reality. He was directly implicated for basically standing on the sidelines and doing nothing. He was the mastermind behind Israeli settlement plans. In other words, them grabbing up more and more land. The idea is that they knew eventually there'd be a two-state solution, so they would settle more and more land with Jewish areas and push the Palestinians into ever more crowded, smaller areas. The idea being that that would make it untenable to have a Palestinian state, and or when the state's maps are drawn, Israel would have more or less free reign over the largest extent of the arable land, the productive land in that region. So it's good that Sharon's dead. I don't care if it's politically incorrect to say so. You can call me a Nazi all you want. It's not going to affect me. He was a butcherous, genocidal maniac. He was a bigot. Just the same as someone like Ahmadinejad is a brutal bigot and doesn't understand reality. It's the same thing. The fact that he happens to be quote unquote Jewish, although his parents were Belarusian, and he's actually Eastern European descent, that fact does not matter. It's not anti-Semitism to criticize someone just because they happen to be a Jew, any more than you're racist against white people if you criticize me. That's clear. It's reality. You can take it any way you want it. It does not matter to me. Peace out.